So about 2 weeks ago, I was at a family cookout, eating that second plate of mac and cheese I promised myself I wouldn't eat. And I was hanging out with my nephew. He's 7 years old. I was doing some card tricks for him. And at a certain point, after a couple of tricks, he looks up at me with those 7-year-old big brown eyes, and he asked me if magic is real. So, I put the cards down. Because on one level, yeah, I want him to believe that anything is possible and that he's gonna do these amazing things. And most of all, that he's protected by these forces that he can't see and that I can't see. On the other hand, he's a 7-year-old African-American boy, and I know he's gonna grow into an adult African-American man. He needs to know what he's up against. And, I need him to believe in himself. So I told him, Jonathan, look, here's what you need to know. Don't let anybody ever tell you can't do what you want to do. But also, you always got to deal with reality. And I saw his little 7-year-old face drop. He went back to playing. And I knew that even though I had tried to soften the blow, he had gotten the real message. There is no magic, and there is no real magical protection. And it was funny that I was the one to deliver that message, because my own relationship to that question is much more complicated. See, when I was 13 years old, my aunt moved to Senegal for a job for a period of time, and she said I could come visit with her and hang with her, right? Now, I had never been to Africa. Like most African Americans, I have no idea where my family really is from, and this was my first time out of the country. So when I landed in the busy city of Dakar, everything was new. This was nothing like the exotic, primitive huts I had learned about in school, right? I mean, this was like even just going down the street to get a piece of bread was like an adventure. New languages, new smells, and new sounds, right? And now, my aunt was gonna be real busy, so she hired a young African man to kind of be a chaperone to hang out with me while I was there. And his name was Ron. And for the time I was in Dakar, Ron was like my big brother, right? He showed me around and he told me about his life. And I told him about my life because I was 13 and things were changing, Up until that point, my family done a pretty good job of sheltering me from the ugliest parts of life. But this was Baltimore in 1980s, and it felt like the danger could just walk right up to your door. I told Ron about how I was playing tag one day and the cops followed me home and questioned my mother. I told him how a lot of my friends had seen people shot, and some of my friends even had guns. So this was like horrifying to Ron, right? This was not the America he had heard about, and he wanted to give me some protection. Ron knew an elder in Dakar who was skilled in the making of certain kinds of charms, special talismans that could protect people from guns and knives. And he was like, a lot of people have these things in Dakar. He wants to get one for me, his little brother, to protect me from the violence of America. So a couple days later, we got on a bus and drove to the outskirts of Dakar. We got off the bus. We walked into this little white house that was filled with necklaces and statues and candles. They told me to walk into, to go into the bathroom, get into a tub, and cleanse myself with this water from this old pail. And when I came out, I put a robe on, and they handed me a white cloth, and it was filled with some black powder. And then Ron and I took that white cloth with black powder to a local tailor and had it sewn into a belt made from animal skins. And I remember just holding it in my little 13-year-old hands and feeling the power. I was like, yeah. Now I'm going to be protected. But then Ron told me there was a catch. He said, in order for this belt to work, you got to believe in it. And the only way for you to believe in it is we got to go back to the priest, you got to put the belt on, and then I got to shoot you. I looked at Ron like he was crazy. I was like, you got to shoot me? I mean, he's like, oh, no, little brother, trust me, the charms is going to work. I would never put you in harm's way. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? This should have been an easy decision. I mean, I wasn't the most street savvy kid, but I did learn rule number one. Never let somebody shoot you, even if they ask nicely. But I really wanted that belt to work. You know, I wanted that shield. Could you imagine walking through the streets of Baltimore with that, right? The power. It was going to change everything. Plus, I trusted Ron, right? Like, why would Ron do this to me if it wasn't going to work? Like, he still had to answer to my aunt. You know? So then I was like thinking, so I was like, all right, well, but I just thought of like, pictured myself facing the barrel of a gun and standing still while they shot it. And I was like, oh, hell no, I can't do this. So Ron was disappointed, but he accepted my choice and we left. We went back. When we got back to my aunt's house, I made an executive decision not to tell my aunt that the chaperone she had hired had just asked to shoot me. You know, but I was curious what my aunt thought, you know, because my aunt's a very no-nonsense kind of person, and I was like, surely she'll validate my responsible choice. So I kind of posed to her, I said, hey, listen, what do you think about charms and kind of like magical talisman? And she said, well, actually, I think they work, but only if you believe in them. So I was like, oh, seriously. So, you know, I never really quite got over this. Like, I went back to Baltimore, and I would put the belt on, you know, and like I kept it, and I would move from place to place with it. But every time I picked it up, I just wondered, like, what if I had gone through with it, right? Does this belt work? Should I have trusted myself? Should I have trusted Ron? I felt like I had blew my one chance to have that protection. A couple years later, when I was 16, my aunt went to move to Ghana. And once again, she invited me to come stay with her. Now, this time while I was in Ghana, I spent a lot of my time hanging with a friend named Kwabena. And, you know, Ghana was a really religious place, but my friend Kwabena could never quite figure out what religion I was, right? He was like, all he knew was I had long dreadlocks down to my shoulders and I didn't eat meat. So he was like, okay, you're a Rasta, right? And he was like, he just called me a pure Rasta, you know? And, you know, sometimes, you know, other Ghanaians didn't understand why I didn't eat meat. They would be like, what kind of African is this? Come on, man. What do you know? And he would say, shut up. He's a pure Rasta, you know. But as I got closer to Kwabena, I wanted him to know the real deal. So one day I told him, I said, you know, Kwabena, I really respect the Rastafarian culture and tradition, but I'm not a Rasta. And he was like, well, are you a Christian? I was like, no. He was a Muslim. He was like, are you a Muslim like me? I was like, no. He was like, I said, you know, the truth is I gravitate more to traditional African religion because that's what was taken away from us. We never had that back in the States. When I told him that, his eyes lit up. He was like, ah. He said, my family is Ewe, and we also practice these traditions. And I want to take you to see how it really goes down in my town. So once again, I found myself traveling to a rural West African town, this time to the Keita region in the northern part of Ghana. And, you know, we had this long bus trip. He was telling me all about the religion. He said, you know, the religion is not all about magic. It's not all about like the way we've learned. But there are some things that to your eyes are going to seem like magic. Got off the bus. He said his grandfather had been the keeper of secrets, but his grandfather was now dead and had passed the secrets on to a young man. And that was who we had to find. We walked from house to house. And what we learned really quickly was that this young priest was not the kind of person you can find. He has to decide if everything is okay, then he finds you. And at 11 p.m. in a bar, he found us. He walked in and he explained that he had done some spiritual readings and found out that yes, Kwabena was an heir to his grandfather's tradition, and also he had some stuff that he wanted to give me. And we left the bar, we walked down a long dirt road. They stopped. He had like an assistant with him. They stopped and they bought a machete. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then we got to a shed, and they explained that there was going to be an initiation. And that initiation would involve a test, and that test would involve a machete. And then they started sharpening the machete. And, you know, while the machete was sharp, something about that metal, just scraping on that metal like that, made me realize, like, wow, you know, this is really like super real. I could actually die out here tonight. But I also knew I had spent all these years just wondering, like, what does this stuff work? I mean, you know, is there this protection? So I made a decision that I was going to face whatever was in this shed. And I can't share with you everything that happened in that shed because some of it is like just for me. But here's what I can share with you. There were prayers made to God and to forces of nature and to our ancestors. At some point, the priest pressed the cold, sharp edge of the machete against my chest and gave me a word which I cannot repeat, and said that basically when I said I was ready, they were going to take a wooden stick and bang knock the back of the machete so that it went right into my chest, but that it would not cut my skin. And then they asked me if I was ready. I took a deep breath and I said I was ready. And then I said the word, and it was like slow motion. I watched him pull back with this wooden stick, and then with all his body weight just slam the machete into my chest. Bang, bang, on this side, bang, bang, on my arms. I looked at my arms, and there was no cuts and there was no blood. And so we all made it out of there alive. And when I reflect on that night, you know, I'm not sure I'll ever understand what fully happened. I mean, I'm somebody who believes in science, right? Like I believe in climate change and all that. Yeah, for real, you know? Just saying. At the same time, for some reason, I needed to take that leap of faith, and I don't have any scars on my skin. And I think that makes me believe that we haven't figured everything in this world out just yet. I also think about what I would tell my nephew if I had a chance to do it all again. And I think a lot of what I would tell him would be the same. I would say, listen, you know, believe in yourself. Try to control the things you can control. But I would also tell him this: there is magic in the world, but don't spend your whole life chasing it, because when the time is right, it'll find you. Thank you.